was sitting and talking over breakfast with some women that I've become really close with since I first moved here, gathering as we do, once a month for a clergy group, area clergy group. And there are 6 of us, and we're serving 4 UCC churches, a temple, and a zendo. And we were discussing the idea of doing things in totally new ways in our ministries in those places. And mostly we don't know what those ways are yet, but we feel inspired to move in that direction because we know that some of the conventional or traditional ways of doing things are no longer working. I know that some of you out there receive my texts in an app called Remind. It was designed as a way for teachers, really, to quickly and safely send messages to their students using cell phone messages. And I could not have told you 24 years ago when I was ordained that part of my ministry and my communication with those in my care would be via messages limited to 140 characters sent through the air. I certainly didn't think I'd be offering pastoral care in that way, and yet sometimes that's how it happens. In my early ministry, I used to see students and parents and families most often at church or at church-sponsored activities, but lately I see a lot more and more of you in your homes or at plays or at sports games or serving at LifeBridge, and a growing number of you in the pottery studio. All of which are great places to know one another. I observe that the number of events and activities that families are involved in these days makes it increasingly difficult for some of you to get to church. I know from talking with you about it that some Sundays are you're simply so exhausted from all that you've been doing on all the other days of the week, not to mention 3 baseball games on Saturday or whatever it is, that sometimes you just need to rest and be at home with your family. I spend quite a bit of time visiting with all of you and playing with your kids at home or going what I like to call walk and talks with individuals or parents when you have a bit of free time after work or maybe in the morning but after you take the kids to school, and sometimes around your dinner table, which is always nice. In other words, increasingly, I go to be with you instead of you coming to see us here at the Meeting House or even at the Emerson Center. Now, we could rail against this and talk about how it used to be and bemoan the changes in our culture's attitude to the practice of faith and the prevalence of sports practices on Sundays. Or we could just listen to what you're all saying and try some things in new ways. At the risk of stating the obvious, our children are the future of this church community and Christ's vision for the larger church. Or, as the Message translation you just heard Damien read says, these children are at the very center of life in the kingdom. There is nothing that should come between children and God, nothing that hinders the ways and the places they express what God means to them, who God is to them, and nothing that dampens their enthusiasm to be here among us, or their deep desire to feel included in worship. Making sure there are a growing and active number of young families and kids who are choosing to be part of our community of faith is something that I and Martin think about quite a bit. It's why we agreed we needed to try offering our Food for the Soul dinner worship services for 3 Saturdays this past program year, and why we plan to expand that to 6 Saturdays in the coming program year. Those gatherings have been intimate, relaxed, creative, nourishing, and fun. We center ourselves to mark the beginning of our time together by lighting candles as a symbol that light grows and grows in each of us when we invite God into our lives with an intention. We share communion at the dinner table, passing the plate and cup from person to person, child to parent, neighbor to friend. We're learning to give and receive each other's blessings before we part from one another, something which is new for many of those of you who gather there. And it feels good to be creating something new, to experiment freely with words and symbols and time and ritual, to explore what God can do among us when we use all our gifts in different ways. What we come up with isn't always the predictable or recognizable stuff we're used to, but still it's wonderfully worshipful and inspiring. We've tried some things that have worked really well, and so we've tried them again, and we've tried some things that didn't work so well, and so we set those aside. And in that new setting, we want to create opportunities that let everyone participate and lead in ways that are meaningful and life-sustaining. Because there are so many ways of expressing our gratitude and joy and sorrow and hope to God. We are all ministers, and so we are all capable of leading worship, asking questions, praying aloud, designing rituals, and offering support. It's been energizing to begin to explore all these things. We're reaching out, stretching, and growing, and it's why we'll be baptizing 7 kids in a couple of weeks on Pentecost Sunday, some of them from member families of this church and some not. We just want them all to feel welcomed into our fellowship. I want us to sow seeds for the future. I want us to practice sending out a message of hope and trust and faith, and then wait together for its return, just like I was talking to the kids about the yo-yos. Our first hymn today to that beautiful English folk melody was written by Brian Wren in 1978. The words, the sentence at the bottom of the hymnal page says that he noted one important hope for all committed Christian relationships, that love may reach out beyond the nuclear family, rather than the more cozy and familiar theme of inviting others into home's warmth and light. Well, we can do both, of course. We can create the kind of warmth and light that we feel at home here as a church when we gather at a candlelit table in the chapel, sharing homemade lasagna, salad, and communion, as we teach our children and learn of the new ways that God's love and presence are often simple and sometimes mysterious. We can also take warmth and light to those places of folks who may have a hard time finding it in their own home, and even to our workplaces. That opening hymn we sang tells us that love is found inside of us, in the trust and care we develop when we reach out beyond our homes. It's found in families feeling loss when loved ones change, and we even find love after painful losses when love is broken. Don't get me wrong. I do not want to throw out convention and leave behind all the familiar ways we've come to know God or gather as a community. There is value in tradition and history. But I do want to add to the ways we experience God and the ways that we're in ministry together. I do want you to know that it's okay if you or your family can't be here every week. We understand. God understands too. We are still a community of faith. Martin and I work hard to make connections between and among you so that our worship time here is not the only time that we see and support each other. And many of you have made connections like this on your own. And yet, there is still more to be done to bring us together. The community groups are an important and developing ministry of our church that have been found in different forms over the years here, from what I understand, and we need them. I hope we're always open to more and new ways to share our lives together and invite each other to know, support, and inspire each of us when we gather. So continuing to think creatively about the ways we're together is something I pray that we remain very open to and talk about. Figuring out new ways of inviting people into our fellowship and wondering with each other what the future holds for us as we enter the realm of God, which is the title of the hymn that we're about to sing, is precisely what God calls us to be doing. Hear the words of that closing hymn when you sing, God's realm has come and yet will be. It is known and yet unknown. Christ revealed its mystery. We are actively engaged in extravagant welcome, radical hospitality, creative dinner worship, and who knows what else will emerge. What we do and how we gather needs to fit our lives and support all of us. Our children, our families, our visitors, and our faithful are telling us what you need, what you are seeking, and what and why it may need to look different. And so I hope that we're listening. The psalmist asks us to remember to teach our children not to be stubborn or rebellious like some of our ancestors, or like our parents, as the Message translation said. So come again, Christ, to rule in that realm that has no end. May our children everywhere hear your greeting. Welcome, friend.